Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, the Woolly Worker Knitting Podcast. My name is Vanissia. I am a knitter, crocheter, aspiring knitting podcaster. I am based in Scotland. I'm originally from Belgium, but I moved to Scotland around 7 years ago to study for university, and I basically never looked back. So I've just started my knitting podcast YouTube channel, and I've made one podcast so far, and I've posted one other one-off video about 10 sweaters I want to make. And today's video is going to be another type of those one-off videos, if that makes sense, where I'm basically going to be talking about my knitting journey and take you with me down memory lane, starting from the very beginning where I learned the knit stitch to the very first accessory I made to the very first sweater garment I made. And I think those videos can be quite fun to watch. I got this idea from watching the wonderful Lindsay from Hive Knits. She made a similar type of video and I found it very entertaining to watch as an intermediate knitter. But I think those videos can be really helpful as well for beginner knitters, because maybe they're at that stage of their journey, the beginning, and if there's any kind of mistakes that we've made that we can reflect on, it can be helpful for beginners to then not make the same mistakes, or maybe jump in with all the information. So yeah, I'm gonna try and make this video, entertaining but also informative, and I'm really gonna try and make a point of reflecting on my knits and what I can learn from them, and draw all that learning and try and communicate that with you. So hopefully you find that enjoyable. So grab yourself a drink. I've got my orange juice. And maybe grab yourself some knitting if you're working on something. Let me know in the comments what you're working on. I think my ideal scenario is that people watch my podcast and knit at the same time, because that's what I do when I watch knitting podcasts. So please let me know if you're working on something. And I'm gonna try and insert B-roll, either photos or videos of all the knits that I talk about, so that we can see it from different angles. And I'm also gonna put all of the relevant information in the description below. If I don't mention it verbally, or if I don't put it on the screen, it'll be in the description. And there's also information on my Ravelry page, so you can follow me on Ravelry or on Instagram at thewoollyworker. I keep both of them, I guess, pretty active or up to date. But before we jump into any of that, I will not forget to mention what I am wearing. So this is the step-by-step sweater. This is designed by Florence at Handmade by Florence, and it's a free pattern, and there's a video that goes with it that walks you through the steps one by one. It's a simple raglan sweater. This is made in Drops, Nepal. It's a mix of alpaca and wool. It's really comfy. I love the fit of this. This is the perfect amount of oversize. Like the sleeves are quite nice as well, but they're not like annoying. I love the fit of this jumper, and it knit up so well. But I will talk about this jumper more when I make a video about all the knits I've done in 2022, which I'm hoping to release before the end of January. But this video that I'm gonna do now is about everything I've knit since I started knitting to basically the end of 2021. So I've got my trusty notebook here, so if I'm looking down, I'm looking at my notes. So I learned to knit when I was in my third year of uni. So I moved to Scotland, started studying, and then in my third year I decided, you know what, I need a new hobby. I was quite into pencil drawings at the time, and I decided I wanted something else that was creative. I've always been quite a creative person, and really into those hobbies where you produce artwork, or DIYs and bracelets and things like that, beads. So I decided to learn how to knit, and I picked up some wool at a charity shop, just some random ball of wool. I could not tell you what the content was, either wool or acrylic, I guess. And then I actually picked up some pencils, because I saw a hack somewhere on YouTube or the internet where you basically just use 2 pencils as needles, which is the worst idea ever. That's the first piece of reflection. Don't use pencils to learn how to knit. Please buy yourself a pair of needles. And I learned the knit stitch, and I made a little garter square. There were like holes in it. Obviously the edges were horrible. I lost or made up stitches, and I didn't really like this. So I think I just give up. And then a little bit later I picked it back up again, and this time I actually bought some needles, and I bought some yarn. or found some yarn in a charity shop, I can't remember, but I remember learning from StudioKnits. I'll link her website or channel below, and I was making little squares, little samples of, I think, cables or textures, and I found that a bit more enjoyable than just a little garter swatch. And I found on her website this really, really cool Harry Potter scarf. Now, controversial opinion, I do not like Harry Potter, but I do like the vibes and the aesthetic and the colors. I really liked, the Gryffindor colors, which is what she made her scarf in. And I think this is a very interesting thing because all beginner knitters probably will want to make a scarf because it's just that like long rectangle, you stop whenever you want. But it's not that simple actually, because you have to decide what you do for the edging. If you're just doing it in stockinette, the edges are going to roll. What about the vertical edges? Do you make a border? Do you make it in ribbing? Do you make a garter scarf flat, which doesn't involve any purling? Or do you learn how to purl and make a stockinette scarf, which has the problems I just described? But all of that I didn't have to think about because StudioKnit had the wonderful tip of making the scarf on circular needles and make it in the round, so it's double layered, and then at the bottom you attach some tassels so that the edge doesn't roll up. So I'll show the scarf, and this is it. I still have it. I absolutely love it. I have worn this so much. So the colors are gorgeous. Oh, stripy. So the colors, the yarn is Lion Brand Wool Ease, and I think this is cranberry and gold. I'll put that below. And as you can see, the tension, the stitches, I'm pretty happy with this. And then at the edge, you just use a crochet hook, go through both layers, and make little tassels. And she walks you through how to do that. So I do wear that a lot. The length of it is quite good. I think she gives the length for a child scarf, but then I just kind of kept going. And however, what I didn't tell you is that this actually took 2 years to complete. So I started this scarf, I think, in February 2018, and then I finished it just at Christmas 2019. So it was just shy of 2 years. And that's because stockinette is the most boring thing in the entire world. I'm sorry, but this was not a fun knit. Like, sure, I wanted to reach the next stripe and keep going, but it was just, I knit because I like to sharpen my skills and learn new things, and there was no learning in this. Like, the beginning, I had to learn how to cast on, how to do this, blah, blah, blah. But then it wasn't satisfying. It wasn't a satisfying knit. But I love the finished product, and it's really warm and nice. I'm pretty sure this is a wool and acrylic mix. I've never washed it, actually. I don't think I blocked it either. But anyway, I'm just gonna move on so we don't spend too much on each item. In the meantime, when this was still on the needles, I picked it up every now and then put it back in the naughty corner when I was too bored. But I learned how to crochet as well, and I was making lots of little toys. And then one day I decided to make my first crochet cardigan, and I followed the pattern from Sewrella. I think it was a free pattern. And I made it in acrylic, and it was way too big. It was awful. Didn't look anything like the photo. The sleeves were way too long, which was the main problem. And it was just kind of chunky looking, not as drapey as a knitted garment would be. So I didn't like that. And it was kind of putting me off of making garments, especially in crochet. But then I kept crocheting and making little toys. Then now we move on to the pandemic, 2020. A lot of people picked up knitting. A lot of people had a really hard time during COVID, myself included. I was living in Edinburgh, and I moved to Glasgow in September of 2020 to study a master's. It was a really, really bad experience. I was so isolated. Without going into too much detail, it was just a really tough time. And I felt like I needed something to keep me busy and focused, and something that I could draw enjoyment from, but also achievement, and something to occupy me during all of those hours being locked inside, So I decided to give knitting another go. And I also discovered Ravelry at that time and new yarns that weren't just Lion Brand or Paint Box, maybe new fibers as well. I was maybe dipping my toes into all of that. So I feel like that's when I really started to pick knitting back up and take it a bit more seriously. And the first thing I made then in Glasgow in 2020 was a cowl or a shawl. So this was made with a ball of Shawl in a Ball by Lion Brand, which is the color changing ball, and I'm not sure of the contents. I might put it on the screen. The content is 58% cotton, 39% acrylic, and 3% other. I think other is tinsel because it's a little bit shiny. But this was a free pattern. The pattern I used was the Autumn Dreams Cowl, and you basically cast on with a provisional cast on, and you work flat. And there's something called a drop stitch, where I think there's some yarn overs, and then you let them drop, and then that creates this kind of line of oh, I'm really bad at explaining, but it's a drop stitch. And it was a bit difficult to master, but I felt like I was learning. Like, it was definitely something that was making me feel more productive in my knitting than that stockinette scarf. So I've got the item here. The colors are great. I mean, this is a beautiful, beautiful gradient sunset kind of feel. So as you can see, I'll show you that kind of stitch I'm telling you about. So I don't know if you can see. Yeah, there's kind of, it's very holey, I guess, and it is kind of lace. So there's garter and the drop stitch. And yeah, I've never worn this, really. I was happy to have made it, but it's not my style at all. You can't really do a triple roll, so you have to wear it like that, which is a bit, I don't know. But then afterwards, actually, at the end of the provisional cast on, you have to graft your ends together. I think using the Kitchener stitch or the 3-needle bind off, one of those. And I felt very proud, actually, of my bind off. Yeah, there it is. Felt quite proud of that. It sort of ends at the way that the colors naturally end anyway. But yeah, that was just a quick little project. It took a week to do, and I felt happy that knitting was not out of the question. And then the second thing I made was a hat, and it was a colorwork hat, and I don't have it with me because I actually gave it to my dad, who saw it in my flat once when he came to visit, and he said he liked it, so I said, go for it, you can keep it, I don't wear this. And it's called the Stormtrooper Beanie, which is also a free pattern, and I made that with some leftover DK acrylic paint box yarn that I had from my crochet days. And it was my first time doing color work, and also I used double pointed needles. It was a set that I bought on Amazon. It was just some wooden needles, I think, and I felt like such a wizard using double pointed needles. I took some photos, which hopefully are all circulating on screen as I'm speaking. So yeah, it felt so fancy having all those stitch markers and needles going everywhere. And I think my floats were okay. It definitely had some puckering. I think that's a mistake that everyone makes at the beginning, is having too tight a tension when making color work. And by the way, none of those things I've mentioned before I made a gauge swatch for or blocked. So I was just really learning things step by step. Of course, I would read the pattern and they would mention a gauge swatch or they would mention blocking, but I would consider those steps as optional, which they're not if you're watching this. And you can take one thing from it, is that a gauge swatch and blocking are not optional. But yeah, I really like making those things. It made me enjoy knitting as a hobby, and it wasn't going too badly. I felt like I wasn't failing or anything, so I thought, yeah, okay, let's keep going. Let's try something harder. Let's make a sweater. So the next thing I made was the Let's Do This sweater, and this is a pattern from Wool in the Gang, and it is a free pattern. And once again, I decided to use all my scraps acrylics because I had accumulated quite a lot of colors from all my toys, so I had big rainbow colors. And this is actually quite a fond memory because I remember trying to do a fade. The original sweater is just made in one solid color, but I think I saw other people on Ravelry make fades and I was really tempted to try that, so I researched about fade techniques, and of course I came upon, you know, Andrea Mowry's fades and examples like that, and hand-dyed yarns kind of going into each other, and I thought, that's gorgeous, I want to do that. And what I didn't know at the time was that I was never going to get that same effect with my big chunky acrylic yarn. But that's fine. And I decided to make my fade pattern using Excel, where I just kind of made colored boxes fading into each other. And I'll insert a screenshot of that because I was quite proud of that. And I held 2 strands of AnneM and 1 strand of DK all together to get this very chunky thing. And I made the sweater on 15mm needles, which I had to buy because I didn't have that. And that was not a fun experience. The sweater is knitted flat, so you make 2 panels and then you seam them together, pick up stitches for the neck, make a roll neck, and then make the sleeves as well, which I think you... I can't remember how you make the sleeves. But this definitely taught me something, is that I don't enjoy making sweaters in pieces or flat. All my sweaters since have been made in the round. But I powered through. According to my Ravelry page here, this took a month to finish, which I guess is not bad for a first sweater. It is a chunky weight. It did fit. I'm gonna say that. I made the size 3, apparently. I did make a gauge swatch for this, actually. But I don't think I still understood really like what it meant or how to measure it or what to change. I think all of that was just going over my head. The thing with that was that it was a very heavy sweater. It didn't seem breathable at all. I was happy to have made it, and it felt amazing, you know, putting it on the first time and thinking, I've made this, look at me. But I've never actually worn it, and I've since then donated it to someone that I hope would make better use of it than me. But I remember taking this video that I'm going to put on screen as well, where I was so proud, so happy. Posted that on Ravelry, got a few likes on it, made me feel very proud. So I think I was quite happy with this and proud. I guess you get that drop shoulder effect, but if you can take anything from my experience is don't make an acrylic chunky sweater as your first sweater, or I don't know. I guess you can if you want, obviously. It's all a matter of style and preference, but it's going to be very heavy and not very wearable, and you can't really put that under a coat or anything. Okay, so the next thing I made was another big lesson. So that came from a book I have, which is the Knitting from the North by Hilary Grant. It's a wonderful book that I still use now and make good things from. But I wanted to make the Barley twist cowl. And this recommends using Shetland wool. Now, I didn't have that with me at the time, and I was wanting to substitute yarn, which is something that you have to learn at some point if you don't have access to all the yarns that the designers that you like recommend. And back then, when I was looking at substitutions, the only thing I really cared about was weight and color, and I never thought about gauge or fiber content, which is the hugest mistake ever. Because when you're thinking about Jamieson and Smith or Jamieson of Shetland heritage yarns that are rustic Shetland wool, they're 2-ply but act as a 4-ply, they're non-superwash, you know, that's never going to compare to a traditional maybe sock yarn or a superwash yarn. So all that to say that I bought some Cascade yarn, heritage sock, and made this. So beautiful color work. This is strikingly beautiful. I love the contrast between the two. But this is way too long. So that's it being seamed. And this is supposed to be a cowl that sits snug on your neck. And look at that. It is so heavy. It's not heavy, but you can tell it's like hanging with its own weight. So something that you can do, I guess, is like double it. But I don't know. I feel like it's just gonna... it's gonna be too snug, so it's too big to be double wrapped, but it's too small to be double wrapped, but it's too big to just hang out. There's a twist to it. I'll show you in the photos because this is just hanging out. So there's a twist on it that you had to seam. I think there's also a provisional cast on, and then also you do join it with Kitchener Stitch or something. Why did I do so many projects with provisional cast on? I hate this, and it's really hard, and it probably would have made me give up if I wasn't so impatient and I guess determined. This is very stretchy. I'll show you some photos. Basically, I made it, I finished it. It seemed weird and it seemed to be not the same as the pattern photos, but I thought maybe when I wash it, it'll be smaller. No, when I washed it and blocked it, it grew so long before I seamed it together. And I was a bit disappointed and sad, but I thought, you know what, like I made a scarf, like and technically I should have done that actually. I shouldn't have seamed it. I could have just made it into a scarf, but this is nice. I quite like this actually, but it's not wearable. But definitely not giving up on that book. I really liked it. I thought maybe I'd buy some Shetland wool. So I did that at some point. I went to the lovely, my favourite shop in Edinburgh, Bee Inspired Fibres. They had some nice selections of Jamieson and Smith Shetland wool, which I bought. And I also bought some nice needles. At some point in this journey, I bought my first set of Chiogu. And I decided to splurge because I was obviously taking this hobby a bit more seriously. It was there to stay. And I was really disliking my wooden needles from Amazon that were flimsy. The writing on it was going away. When I used it with Shetland wool, for example, when I got it, the rough yarn was catching on the wood so much that it was really hard to knit, and now I only knit on my metal needles. So I splurged for Christmas, bought myself a set of Chiogu interchangeable red cables circular needles, and that changed my life. Circular needles are so good, and beginners should definitely consider getting themselves a set because it does save money in the long run. It offers so much more flexibility because you can also knit flat with them if you want, but the opposite is not true for straight needles. So I don't know why shops and everything insist on pushing straight needles when the circular ones are better, in my opinion. So I've made all these knits, I've learned some lessons, and I'm deciding to learn a new technique. I'm going to try and learn lace. So I decided to go on Ravelry and find another free pattern and use some stash. So at this point you can see I was very stash focused, not buying any new yarn, and trying to get free patterns as well, just, you know, trying to be economical. After all, I just spent so much money on needles. So this is the Revontuli Northern Lights, and I made it with Kinkle Riot double knitting in the color Rhapsody 240. So I still have it here. And this is a shawl, and this is something that I quickly learned is shawls are beautiful. They're really pretty, they can showcase your skills and showcase your yarns, but they're not wearable. At least for me, especially because the more interesting you make them, and the more, in terms of textures and colors, the less wearable they will be. So that's it. Ooh, oh, this is great. So this is the side of it, and then it goes and repeats that pattern all the way. Look at that. That's beautiful. And I actually did block this, and I'll show some photos because it really, it was amazing. I love those photos. They really remind me of that magic of blocking and lace opening up and everything. So you can see it's got like points like that. I'm storing this all rolled up. And this is a mix of acrylic, if it's not all acrylic. So it did still block, which is great, but obviously it would have blocked better if this was 100% wool. Yeah, this is 70% acrylic and 30% wool. So I remember, I think I only had one skein of this, and when I finished it, I wanted it to be longer, so I ordered a second skein, and then did a bit of math to figure out when I should stop doing it. It was quite fun and a rewarding project because the rows were really short at first, but then as you go, it's becoming longer and longer to go back and forth. But I think it was a really nice project to learn lace. It was satisfying, and like I said, the colors are gorgeous, and it was really fun to do, just not wearable. And it taught me to block. So now we move on to the second phase, which is better knits, I think. This is where I really started getting better and picking better patterns. So this is a rainbow striped sweater, and to date, it's still, I think, one of my most liked projects on Ravelry. I was so proud of that sweater. So it's a top-down, in the round raglan sweater, and it has this lovely rainbow detail on the sleeves, which is made actually with crochet. And now that I'm thinking about it, I haven't seen that technique pretty much anywhere else. So maybe I'll modify a sweater pattern and add that detail because I really like it. The sweater was made with Lion Brand Comfy Cotton Blend. I bought 3 skeins of it and I used 2.5 in the color Whipped Cream. So it's a cotton blend. It was nice to try something else than acrylic for once. I really enjoyed working with the cotton. It was quite soft. And the problem though is that it's unforgiving in terms of tension issues. So even after blocking, it still looks a bit messy and wonky. So I've got it here. I also have never worn this, sadly. Oh, sorry. Is this? Yes, this is. The neckline is huge, actually, as you can see, which probably is also a problem. I think lots of people have commented on Ravelry project pages that the neckline is too big. And it's got those nice sleeves, as you can see. Ah, pretty. It fits well. I was happy with the size I chose. This is a tubular cast off as well, I'm just noticing. So that's amazing. So I learned the tubular cast off. I think the neck stitches are picked up as well afterwards to make this rib. And it's got a split hem. How fun. So I'll post some photos on that as well on the screen so you can see. This was a paid pattern. It was really well written. I think I did a gauge swatch. I said it on my Ravelry notes. The pattern is nice for a fur sweater. It's challenging and complex enough that it makes me feel proud of every row, but easy enough that I didn't give up straight away. So I think that sums it up. And even though I've never worn this, I'm still super proud of that sweater. And as you can see in the little video, I'm just beaming with joy. Then I tried some colorwork mittens again. Those are the Silver Dream mittens, and it's a free pattern by Drops. And here they are. They are way too big. That's the only problem. So that's the back. Nice little pointy mittens made with some stash yarn in acrylic. And yeah, they're too big, they're not practical. They're okay. I never wear them. I think I wore them out a couple of times back in that 2020 winter, but yeah, I don't love them. But I think the color work is quite alright. I think this is not bad for beginner, and you can see that like little edge detail. It was nice to learn the construction on how to make like thumbs and like increases, color work, and also the difference between the two, because your tension changes when you leave too long between two socks or two mittens. The next thing then that I've made is, to date, one of my favorite knits, but the only problem is that I felted them. So they're mittens from that same book I talked about, the Knitting from the North. They're the Fisherman's Rib mittens. I made them in this beautiful Shetland wool from Jamieson & Smith in the color Petrol. And here they are felted. So I'll show some photos on screen of what they were looking like when they weren't. But here they are now. You can't see any stitch definition. The color's pretty accurate. That's what they look like in real life. And I wore them all the time for so long. They were my comfort item. It was amazing. I used pretty much one skein, even though the pattern calls for two. So I have one ball extra, which I might just remake them because honestly, why change perfection? And I've made those using then that really scratchy, rough Shetland wool and my new Chiogu metal needles. And the difference was insane. The process was so much more enjoyable. They fit perfectly. They were done really, really fast as well. The seaming is always the thing that's a bit annoying. They're seamed using the mattress stitch, which I learned doing my rainbow stripe sweater, because you had to make the sleeves flat and then you seam them at the underarm, and apparently this adds more structure. So it was nice to learn a new skill with every project and add that to my repertoire of skills, and then every new project you can draw on those skills. And then when I made my next sweater, I had already learned the tubular cast off, and then when I made the rainbow striped sweater, when I had to pick up for the neck, I had already learned that from the Let's Do This sweater in the big chunky acrylic. So even though half of those projects I've shown you so far I never wear and didn't even like that much, none of them were a waste of time or money because I learned so much from them. Okay, now, the next big thing. I think this is my first real wearable sweater. And this is a sweater I was wearing in my last video, so if you haven't seen me wear it, you can go and check that. But this is the Vintersol sweater by Jennifer Steingass from Knit Love Wool. And this is the most... what a story. There's so much to say about this. First of all, the construction is the weirdest thing ever, because you actually start at the bottom of the yoke with a provisional cast on. Why do I do this? So you start with a provisional cast on at the bottom of the yoke, and you work your way up, and you make it with decreases. Then you reach the neck, and apparently this is made to be more customizable, she says. So you can make the yoke shorter or longer, but I guess you can do that top down as well. But anyway, then you cast off with an I-cord edge. So I'll learn how to do an I-cord. And then you pick the stitches back at the yoke, and then you work your way down the sweater. And it was really difficult to cast on that many stitches as a provisional cast on, but then after that, the rows were getting shorter and shorter, so it was quite satisfying. The yarn I used for this was my first, I felt, big purchase. It was Malabrigo yarn, Rios, in the colorways Lettuce, Pearl, and Playa. It was quite expensive because I think I bought 4 skeins of lettuce, 2 skeins of Playa, and 1 skein of Pearl. So it was actually quite an expensive sweater. And I have some leftovers, and I'm trying to make some hats or headbands out of it. It was a superwash wool, which I didn't still understand really what that meant, and what it means is that it stretches out quite a lot, and especially sweaters, they're quite heavy, so the sweater can end up quite a bit longer than what you initially anticipated or wanted. I really enjoyed making that sweater though. It felt like such a feat. I think I went up 1 needle size for the color work, and I shouldn't have done that. It's a tip that lots of people say, but it just didn't work for me, and my color work ended up too loose, and my yoke ended up too big. And the main problem I have with this sweater is that the yoke basically is way too low, and it gives me those like bat wings, and I can't lift my arms without the entire sweater coming up. But still quite comfy. It's so wearable. It's next to skin soft, so I wear it all the time when I'm at home. I don't know if I've worn it out too much, but like I wear it a lot in like online meetings and everything. Took a month to do. I also blocked it. I blocked the yoke actually when it was done. Then I blocked the sweater afterwards. Made the second size. So yeah, I'm saying on Ravelry, like a lot of my projects, after a slight slowdown in the middle, lack of motivation, loss of interest, and fear it does not look great, all of this goes away once it's finished. I'm really chuffed with how it looks, the pattern, and my choice to keep everything as the pattern said. I think I was second guessing and doubting a lot of what the pattern was saying, and I was just thinking, no, just do it, just do it. Like for example, they had some body shaping, waist decreases, which I did, not fully understanding what they did, and I actually quite like it. So I bought a few more of Jennifer's patterns, and I was excited to do more of those, and I did 1 more of those, which I will show in a minute. So this thing I made were some Songbird mittens by Erica Heusser, and I made that using Knit Picks palette in cream and blue. I really like Knit Picks. I bought a few more of their colorways. It's really good for color work. So here are the mittens. They're really nice. They're like a work of art. The color work is reversed, as you can see. It's so nice. There are quite a lot of long floats, which was difficult to manage. But I love that hand pattern as well in the inside. This is beautiful. And they do fit, which is great. I've worn it a few times, but I think I just prefer fingerless mitts. But they do fit quite nicely. It was a difficult pattern to do, and it was on small needles. But yeah. Oh, look at that. Yeah, they're really nice. They're really soft. The color work is gorgeous. I feel like such an artist having made these. And they get me lots of compliments when I show them to people. So that was nice, and I would recommend her patterns. She has so many other ones, including one that I will talk about in my videos. In my video where I talk about all my knits from 2022, because I made another one of her patterns. Then after that I made another shawl, because apparently I don't learn from my mistakes. That was also to use up some stash. This is called the Ex-Boyfriend's Shawl. This is just in garter stitch. And this is a Karen cake, Karen Simply Soft, I think. And you can see it's like asymmetrical. So I started off here with that red, and then it goes into all of those stripes. The stripes get bigger, so the rows get bigger, so the stripes themselves get thinner. And I never wear this. It's just garter, and I really don't like garter or think it's nice looking. I much prefer stockinette personally. The edge, I think, is just a garter edge. I don't even think it's a slipped edge, nor an I-cord edge. This kind of reminds me of all the Sophie shawls and Sophie scarves that you see everywhere. But this is a less nice version of the Sophie scarf, because at least the Sophie scarf has a bit more finishing details, whereas this is just the most basic triangle of garter. But then I guess if you're learning and you don't want to make a full garter scarf, you could make that kind of garter shawl, because at least you'll have to learn decreases or increases to make that slanted edge, which can keep things a bit more interesting. But yeah, that was just to use up some yarn, but I don't really, just never been picked up. Next thing is a top, and it's the most stupid thing ever, because this is an acrylic crop top. This is from Jessie Maed Design, My Little Secret crop top. Yeah, and it's in the size S, and I made this on 4.5mm in AnneM yarn, in, again, acrylic. So why would I do that? I think I'm gonna definitely revisit this pattern, but with a much better yarn. Again, for yarn substitutions, please think of fiber content almost first and foremost. I think the most important thing is gauge, and then it'll be fiber content, and then color. Who cares about color if this is made of acrylic? So it's got some ribbing, and then like some 1x1 rib, and then it's got some 3x3 rib. And I'll show a couple of pictures. I've never worn this. I just put it on for the photos and then just never touched this again. There's still some ends hanging out. But I didn't want that to stop me from making more summer knits. So that was made in May, and then I moved. And I was doing a bit more crochet than knitting. But I picked up knitting back in September 2021, and I made the outline tank by Jessie Maed. So clearly I hadn't given up on Jessie Maed, and her designs are absolutely gorgeous. And I made this with another stash yarn that was left over from my blanket, a crochet blanket that I might show one day, which is still one of my favorite crochet pieces. And this is Sheep She's Whirlet in the color Luscious. And this took less than one skein, so this is it now, and it's a really nice little outline tee, or tank even, because I think she has a t-shirt version of this. So basically what you've got is that nice feature of dropped stitches. So you have to drop all the way and like let the stitch just unravel basically. And that goes all the way to the straps. So the two stripes are down here at the front and the sides and the back and the other side. So it's really nice. And I've worn this a few times. I actually have worn this, but not that much. I think it's hard to know what to wear underneath. And it is comfy and breathable though, so it's really nice on really hot days, but we don't have that many hot days in Scotland. I did a gauge swatch. I did make sure to wash it. Again, cotton is not very forgivable on tension issues. I like it. It's okay. It was difficult to know what size to make it, like when to, like the straps, and then also the body, and when to stop, and I'm still struggling with that so much nowadays, is like, when do I stop knitting? So I still don't know the answer to that. So next project is another one from Jennifer Steingass from Knit Love Wool, and it's the Forest Land. And that one is also made with Malabrigo. So this is a sweater, and that yoke is so gorgeous. It goes all the way like that. So that motif looks like this kind of like a wreath or a wreath. What's that word? I'm not sure about the colors. This and my other Malabrigo sweater, I think I just got overwhelmed with Malabrigo's colorway like choices and palette that's available, and looking at all the projects on Ravelry and deciding which one I like best and which one I wanted to recreate. And some colors look so good on people. One of their very popular colorway, I think, is called Frank Ochre, and that goes so well with people that have dark hair. And it's this kind of like ochre gold color, very yellow. And it was so popular and everyone was making projects with that it made me want to do it as well. But I had to keep reminding myself that yellow does not look good on me. That blue looked great, but it is so bright and vibrant. It's a statement. I still wear the sweater because once again, it feels amazing. I don't need to wear a t-shirt or a top underneath. I love the length I made this at. The sleeves and the body length are perfect. The yoke is much better than the previous one. The only problem with that sweater, however, is my color work. Once again, I think I made the color work in a needle size up, or I made sure to be extra loose and keep the same needle size, but then the color work ended up turning out so messy and holy and almost like raised. So I'm not proud of this, but I'm going to show you the color work in more detail. I don't know if you can see much from this, but I don't like it. I think the V's are very prominent. You can't see it from far away. I'm also quite happy because you can't see the colorway, like when you change the skeins. Like I didn't alternate, I just went and kept going, because some people said that they had problems with Malabrigo because it's hand dyed, that you can see like stripes of you changing up the yarn, but I didn't have any problems, which is great. So this used 4.7 skeins in total. So I think, yeah, 4 of blue and then 1 of white. So that's, I think, a little cheaper than the previous one. And yeah, again, still want to do more of Jennifer Steingass's patterns. I've got quite a lot in my library that I should really get onto. So the fit is much better. Color work is not great. I really need to... I think I've mastered color work on mittens and hats, but I've not mastered color work on sweaters. And I am still yet to try color work on socks. Ooh, the lighting is changing, isn't it? Yeah, there we go, it's clouds. But that's okay. So yeah, I think hopefully you can see the evolution of my projects where I'm getting a bit more daring with my sweaters, definitely sticking to top-down constructions. Those 2 ones from Jennifer Steingass are circular yokes, but I now realize I much prefer raglans. I think they fit my shape better, or my body, I guess. I still am struggling to pick the right colors for me. As you can see, that very vibrant green and vibrant blue are very bold and daring, and now I much prefer neutrals. I know it's kind of a running joke of, you know, the beiges from Knitstagram. I think this grey is lovely. I think this is just so much more me and so much more what I would wear. But the other sweaters are so comfy in Malabrigo. But I would recommend, if you're going to do something in Malabrigo, you need to read up on superwash wool and how it behaves, and maybe make a hat first to realize kind of how it works up, and make a swatch. Obviously, always make a swatch. And then, I guess, sizing down as opposed to sizing up, because it will grow horizontally and vertically. But it seemed like such a popular yarn choice from people on Ravelry. When they're making Jennifer Steingass's patterns, they seem to always use Malabrigo. But I think I want to try to do a colorwork sweater without Malabrigo. I think a colorwork sweater in non-superwash wool, where the yarn bites a little more and slips less, would be a good way to perfect my colorwork, just the same way that I do now my colorwork with rustic wools. And speaking of which, that leads me perfectly onto my last knit of 2021, which is a cowl, and surprise, surprise, it's in Shetland wool, and it's from that same book. So yeah, I've made 3 patterns from that book last year. And this is my favorite cowl. I usually don't even wear cowls, but this really gave me a taste for them. I don't think I would have ever bought a cowl, but because I made this, I was so happy to wear it. So this is it, and it's also this kind of like Mobius twist, provisional cast on and then grafted once again. And this is the colors that the book suggests, and isn't that the most beautiful mix? The colors are Mermaid, Natural White, Heron, Ginger, Aqua, and Stonewash. And all the details for this are in my Ravelry page. I love this cowl so much. I wear it all the time. It's not too scratchy. Like, I think this is what helped me get a bit more used to wool as opposed to acrylic. Oh, yeah, it's perfect. It's like the right amount of like being tall, and so I can, you know, kind of put my head in it if it's windy, but I don't feel like I'm being strangled or choked. You can put the little twist like that, like at the front, or you can put the twist at the back. You can put whatever color you want at the front. It's double thickness, so that was knitted in the round, like a tube. And I'll show all the photos on screen if I haven't already, but I was obsessed with this. I took so many photos when it was done. The color work on this I'm so proud of because it's not raised at all. Look at how the two colors just completely are even and level with each other. I blocked this. This is my seam actually in the red. Can you see that? I think I did a pretty good job at the grafting. And again, blocking helped. No, actually, I think I blocked before I grafted it, so blocking didn't help. This is all me. But yeah, this made me feel like I wasn't actually such a terrible color work knitter, and that the other sweater was a fluke. But it does show that it's not just about your skills, but also the tools you're working with. Like I said before, changing to the Chayogu needles, which are just the single most used needles I use now. I don't use any other pairs. I don't use any other needles or brands. So using good tools and then good wools and yarns and fabrics and materials can really make or break your knitting experience and make it more enjoyable, and then they can also improve on the final result, make them more wearable. So a bit of planning beforehand can go a long way in making this a more sustainable thing. I think back then when I was making those shawls and everything, it was more about, oh, I want to make something. But then now that I'm a more proficient knitter, I think I'm more thinking about, yes, I want to make something, but I also want to keep it and wear it and not just have it take up space in a box in the corner of my room like half of those things do. But I'm really happy I got a chance to show you all of that. Let me know if this resonated with you, any of the points I've made, if you've made any of those patterns, or if you have any questions as well. Like I said, I'll put all the information in the description, and most of these projects are on Ravelry, where I actually kept quite a detailed log of my thoughts and the colorways and needle sizes. So definitely check that out, and maybe, you know, add me as a friend on Ravelry or follow me on Instagram. But yeah, I hope this video was enjoyable. I hope it wasn't too rambly. It was difficult to know in how much detail and depth to go into those items. Most of those I will never show again because they're going to go back in the box. But I think some of them, they definitely might make a comeback, or I could show on Instagram because I still use them as part of the normal rotation, like the sweaters, like the one I was wearing in my previous video. And I wanted to take a quick second as well to thank you all so much for the feedback and the response that you gave to my first video. I was so nervous to post this online and, you know, to have 0% see it or have no one care, but actually there were quite a few comments and likes and lots of people subscribed, which really made me feel so good about, you know, I'm doing this for a reason and people are interested in my knits, and it made me so encouraged to make more of those videos. So if you've subscribed, thank you so much, it means the world. And then if you haven't subscribed and you like this kind of content, then please subscribe. I'm hoping to make quite a lot more videos. I've got lots of ideas. I think the next one on the list is definitely a wrap-up of 2023. And then obviously there's going to be normal podcast episodes where I'm talking about what I currently have on the needles and also what I finished since the last podcast, and there's actually quite a few things. Yeah, if you have any feedback about this video, any things that you would have liked to be different, or anything that you like that you want me to keep, then let me know. You can always drop me a message on the platforms I've mentioned or a comment. And yeah, if you wanted to share this channel or talk about it to your friends, that would also be great. I hope you've made some progress on whatever project you were working on, and I hope that you have a wonderful day wherever you are and that you're doing well. But I'll see you in the next video. Bye!